Good afternoon, Ali. How are you?
Good afternoon, Fernando. I'm good. How are you, friend?
Good. I'm a little tired. I haven't slept today. 3 in the morning in the West Coast. But we got to get through this one.
Yeah, this is important. So we have, to cope with it.
Right. I heard you telling me you were having a rough day today. So I hope you're feeling better and not too tired as well.
Yeah. I was having some troubles with my wife today. I took her to the hospital and just came back. But since the topic is very important, I fought hard to join you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope she feels better. Hope she gets better really quick.
Hopefully.
Hope for the best. So today, thank you again. Thank you for joining me. We've been talking about this for a couple of days already, and we're doing this fairly quickly. This episode fairly quickly and unexpected, just because we got lucky and we got the copy of the UN Panel of Experts report that's coming out at the end of this month. We already saw Reuters came out with an article on Tuesday, focusing on the finance section. But what we want to do is we want to dissect the report that we have so far, keeping in mind that what we have is a draft, I believe is a draft of the report. It's not the final report. It looks like it was just submitted to the committee. So we want to look at what the UN Security Panel on Yemen has been discussing for the last year almost, since April of last year, their investigations. I was fortunate enough to have been part of the UN panel 2017, 2018. Excuse me. And so keeping up with these reports is a hobby for me more than anything almost, but it is very important when we're talking about Yemen because it sort of, wraps up a lot of what's been going on the ground in Yemen from a different perspective. And it's always interesting to see their investigations, keeping up with the mandate again. And so for me to share it with you and asking you to help me go through it, it's definitely interesting because for the first time, I'll have a Yemeni perspective on this. And give me a second. And I want to get to you to help me understand, how Yemenis see these reports. What are Yemenis talking about when they read such reports about the conflict in their own country.
Okay.
So first, we are going to come out with the audible version of this episode, because unfortunately it's going to take a little bit longer to edit the video. So I hope that I am able to, that I'm good at keeping track of what we talk about, that's going to come out on the audio version versus what's going to come out in the video, because we're going to share some stuff. I want to share the report, some of the text of the report, so our viewers can follow, but then also so our listeners are able to follow when they can't see what we're sharing on the screen. But I'll make sure that we keep up with that so that we give our listeners, a better, graphic description of what we're sharing on the screen. And for those of you joining us later on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, you can see this video. We hope that it helps you understand a little bit more what we're going to be discussing and how all of this text links to what we're seeing today on the ground. So let's hope that there's no technical difficulties, and I'm able to do this fairly well. So you tell me, Ali, you tell me if you can't see it, if there's a problem, help me out, and I can fix the glitches, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So first, we're going to go through, well, there's the first glitch. First, we're going to go through the executive summary. You can see this, Ali?
Yeah, I see it. See it very clearly.
Excellent, excellent. So for our listeners, I'm sharing on the screen, I'm sharing the summary of the final report with some highlights from my notes. What I want to highlight more or less from the summary, and this is just the introductory segment of the report by the panel, and it just touches briefly on each of the sections that make up the report. For those of you who have not read any of these reports, are not familiar, what you're going to see is this report that's about 230 pages so far right now. Might be less, might be a little bit more by the time they come up with a public version. This report has 4 components. It has the political, regional section. It's then followed by the weapons portion, the investigation into weapons during the conflict. And then it goes to finance, and then the IHL, the International Humanitarian Law investigations at the end. And then they have a series of annexes that help explain most of the content, most of the text in the report. And we'll go through some of those. We'll go through some of those annexes so you can see the weapons that they're talking about. And we'll be able to link you up with some recent investigations that we have on social media, for example, by think tanks or other individual analysts that have looked at the conflict. This report has a number of confidential annexes. We won't show those. We're not, it's bad enough that we get a leaked version, but out of respect to the framework of this report, we won't share the information that is in the confidential portion of this report. So we're only going to address that which is going to be public. This report, as we're going to look at it, will be public by the end of January, beginning of February. Okay, so then first the summary. So here we go. To begin, the first sentence, the situation in Yemen has continued to deteriorate with devastating consequences for the civilian population. I'm a little bit disappointed in this opening statement, let's say, and just because when I was part of the panel really got into using very realistic, very strong language in the summary. And, we went from an opening statement where, the panel highlighted the fact that Yemeni unity had disintegrated, the fact that it was very improbable. It would not be probable to reunite the country. And this was 2017, before Ali Abdullah Saleh was killed, before the SDC was founded. Before the clashes between GOI and the SDC, before Houthis, got to within 30 kilos of Marib city. So I think, in my opinion, the opening statement, the opening sentence for this should have been stronger. It should have really gone in and described the situation as it is. This was written in December, the first week of December 2020, but still, there was a lot going on by December. We still didn't have the coalition government in the first week of December. What do you think, Ali?
Yeah, exactly, Fernando. The opening sentence wasn't that, exclusive or doesn't give the whole picture or the large picture for what has been happening here in Yemen. Also, neglected or ignored some big deals happening on the ground, and just repeated what has been repeated by the media.
Exactly. So then, the first paragraph continues to highlight the three factors that are contributing to the deterioration of the situation on the ground, and that is, the economic profiteering by all Yemeni parties, which, it's interesting in itself. It's not just focusing on the Houthis, the corruption of Houthis, but it is talking about a number of actors on the ground, and how this is affecting human security. Then there's also the continued violation of IHL with impunity by, a number of actors. And then the escalation and fighting and the impact on the on civilians and aggravating the IDP situation, more internally displaced persons because of the conflict. And there is a section on COVID, so we'll see if the panel addressed the impact, the role of COVID in the increasing number of IDPs that we've seen.
Fernando, let me translate to those who are following us in Arabic, so they can catch up and see how the report of the panel was built. الحكومة التقرير بدأ بأن الوضع في اليمن متدهور للغاية. هناك 3 عوامل رئيسية تلخص الوضع في Fernando, can you break it down a little bit from the beginning? Yeah. 3 عوامل رئيسية أسهمت في تدهور الوضع على الأرض، بحيث أصبح الاقتصاد في البلد كل الأطراف في اليمن استفادت، أطراف الصراع استفادت من الاقتصاد، أو حولت الاقتصاد لصالحها، وهو ما أثر على الأمن الإنساني، وكذلك استمرار الانتهاكات لحقوق الإنسان والقانون الإنساني العالمي. ومعظم هذه الانتهاكات التي حدثت للمدنيين مرت بدون عقاب، وكذلك تصاعد أعمال الاشتباكات وأعمال والمواجهات التي أثرت سلبا على المدنيين، ما في ذلك النزوح.
Right, and then what the panel then goes on to describe, how the government how the government of Yemen has further lost strategic territory to the Houthis and to the security to the Southern Transitional Council. So this is interesting. This is more interesting, aside from the first sentence, that the panel recognizes that the STC has now pushed the GOY out of strategic territory on the ground, and we'll address this, but more specifically, Aden, the Aden, which is the interim capital under the President Hadi. Then we continue, and then this addresses this situation with the STC. Not just the Houthis, but with the STC within the framework of UN Security Council 2216 of 2015. So this is interesting, and we'll go over it later on further down. The panel also looks at Aidarus Zubaydi and Hani bin Break as their actions constituting violations of Resolution 2216 for destabilizing the situation in Aden, Abia, and Shebwa, and Socotra. So this is interesting, and we'll go through that. Next, the summary, the next paragraph addresses the tensions within the Houthi leadership, the infighting that's been going on among Houthi leaders. And in this case, the panel highlights Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, a member of the Supreme Political Council, and Ahmed Hamid, the head. He is the secretary of the president, Mashad, of the Supreme Council, and names Abdul Karim al-Houthi, Abdul Karim Amir al-Din al-Houthi, who is the current Minister of Interior and is the uncle of Abdul Malik Badr al-Din al-Houthi. So these are the two, and these are important. I'm mentioning their fathers' names because we'll get into it later and how we see the two wings of the Houthi family. And we'll also touch on why we insist on saying the Houthi family, not the Houthi rebels, not the Houthi movement, etc. And then it describes the situation in Taiz, which is very interesting. We'll address that as well in naming Sheikh Hamoudat Maglafi, who resides now in Turkey. He's not in Taiz anymore. And then we get into the situation of the failed Stockholm Agreement, which we went through with, Ustad Khaled al-Yamani on their first episode, and then it gets into the role of Iran in specific, which is a big section. And I was surprised that Reuters took the bait on the finance section and instead of the Iran weapons section. So it was interesting. Usually, the media grab onto whatever, the panel reports on Iran as the main headlines, but this time they went with the finance section. Interesting enough, then we get into, the politics where the panel starts addressing the UAE, Saudi, the relationship with the SDC, the role of the increasing role of Iran, the bigger footprint from the Islamic Republic, and a section on Oman. And I know that you're very interested, Ali, in this section. This section mentions the role of mercy flights, which I've discussed earlier, and we've known since 2016 the role that these flights between Sana'a and Muscat have played in the relation between Houthis and Iran. And then the weapons section. So this is also interesting. This is something that I really want to highlight. The investigation, the weapons expert has been on the panel for about 3 years, I think, to 3 years. 3 years. And he's very good at this stuff. And he goes through the UAVs, he goes through the mines, he goes through the missiles. So this stuff is really good. There's an investigation on the dhows that have been seized, smuggling weapons, and we'll go through that. And then there's the economic section, which deals with what Reuters reported about the corruption and the CBY in contracts given to one particular company. The IHL then moves into the torture, the landmines, the recruiting of children, repression of journalism, the absence of the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to go right through that really quick. Ali, anything you want to highlight so far?
No, thanks, Fernando. I think you have to go step by step, so you give more details on every point.
Right. So first, we're gonna go through the finance section, right? So
yeah,
you wanna go through that? You wanna say something about that first, Ali?
It's very important point in the report, Fernando, because it reveals something which has been, confidential, and most of the public don't know anything about it. Today, I mean, here in Adan, because I have seen some local journalists addressing this and tweeting about them, especially those the economic analysts. I have seen some of them they highlighting this exactly, and they said the government also or the president take the decision to sack the attorney general before the UN panel report just appears, so they avoid to be held accountable. This is what they have been saying.
Good. Okay, so then what I want to go through, I want to go through some of this stuff in the finance section. A big section of this is the finance expert looked at the Houthi finances, looked at a copy of the Houthi budget from 2019. And a big issue here was what the panel is referring to, a drop in revenue. And in this, the panel means, the government institutions in Sana'a, through their taxation, through their operations, they should have had sufficient income coming from the areas they control, from the private companies they control, in the territory they control, Houthis control, in order for them to make deposits into the CBY in Sana'a and be able to pay salaries, be able to share that revenue with President Hadi's government.
Yeah.
But the way that the panel is describing the situation is the Houthis are diverting revenue from the private companies, from tax collection. They're diverting that money either to themselves or to other projects or the war effort. So
the war effort, yes, the war effort.
So instead of the government collecting taxes in order to pay for government employees, pay salaries, the example of Kamaran company, for example, is the cigarette company. It's very interesting that they focus on Kamaran because, the Ministry of Sports, of Youth and Sports, has a special tax on cigarettes that they collect and goes to the youth and sports, right? One, Kamaran.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Fernando, how much the panel estimated the revenue that the Houthis just received in 2019?
Yeah, the Reuters diversion of funds, they are estimating $67 million. So 23, almost 24 billion riyals, right? But that's in 2015. So if we look since 2015, the panel has looked at Kamaran and this issue of the money and the taxation since 2015. So in 2015, it's the equivalent of $64 million, almost $65 million. That is huge because it can go up. Yeah, I mean, it's just huge amounts of money, especially because in 2017, the dollar was at 250 riyal.
Exactly.
So this is pretty big money. So on paragraph 96 of this version, the panel looks at Kamaran in 2019, where they highlight more than 8.5 million riyal paid to members of parliamentary committees. So this instead of this money going to pay salaries for civil servants, it's gone directly to members of parliament, including the speaker.
Yes. Some of top leaders in the Houthi movement have benefited most of these heaps of money for themselves. And
right.
Fernando, if you link what the panel just mentioned with the last video footage of Abdul Malik al-Houthi when he said that some mushrifin have been consuming everything for them for their own interests. So because I have received information that some of those top leaders have been building huge buildings.
Villas. Yeah. Apartment buildings and their own villas. So we'll get to this. We'll talk about this when we talk about the politics and the infighting between the Abdul Malik wing and the Abdul Karim wing. But just to highlight some of this stuff, the panel highlights extortion of established businesses, and mainly, I've written about this on the wing under the Abdul Karim al-Houthi, and these are the supervisors are under the Ministry of Interior. And the supervisors are the ones that will head. They're like, shadow mayors, shadow ministers, etc. And these are the people in charge of a lot of this stuff. There are two interesting things here. One is the panel didn't address, even though it addressed oil, it didn't address the line from 2019 about the role of oil companies under names owned by Houthi leaders that they've used to transfer oil into Hodeidah or other parts, smuggled or through UNVIM, through UN inspections. So I was surprised that we didn't see a follow-up on this, because in 2018, 2019, there was enough about oil, and not just from the Houthis, but also from Aden. If those people, those of you audience that have read these reports will recall that there was a section on government officials owning oil companies and controlling Bureka refinery, for example, or the problem of why Aden was not getting oil back in 2016, 2017. So this is missed altogether in this report. And also, another interesting thing is paragraph 97, and on paragraph 99, actually, that looks at taking of freeze asset. The Houthis have been seizing assets of rivals, and mainly what they've done is they've taken properties belonging to GOY government officials living outside, or their rivals, whether it's from Mu'tamar, Islah, or allies of the president.
This was totally missed, right?
Yeah, but now in paragraph 99, they look at Ali Abdullah Saleh. So now the Houthis are finding legal ways of confiscating the properties of Ali Abdullah Saleh's family. So basically what the Houthis can now say is, we are doing the work of the UN. The UN has an asset freeze on the Ali Abdullah Saleh's properties and assets. We are doing that job for the UN here in Yemen. One of the big mistakes, though, and hopefully they fix it by the time the report comes out, is it addresses properties and funds of Saleh's children and mentions Tariq and Ammar. These are nephews of Ali Abdullah Saleh. These are not the sons of Ali Abdullah Saleh. Khalid and Ahmed, are the sons of Ali Abdullah Saleh, but they should change that to relatives of Ali Abdullah Saleh. So this is very interesting, and I want to, they appointed a special custodian, a special judicial custodian. His name here before Saleh Musfir Saleh al-Shair. He's named the judicial custodian of funds, and he is supposed to legally oversee the taking of Ali Abdullah Saleh's properties wherever they may be under their control. So that's interesting in itself. Now it gets to the good stuff, sort of, because we heard from our friend Labib Nasher in our first episode we heard of this issue with the central bank, the corruption of the central bank. And so this is an interesting portion here that I'll highlight if I can move this stuff to share. So in paragraph 103, the report starts talking about corruption, money laundering by officials associated with the Yemeni government, specific with the central bank in Aden. So again, this is interesting because Labib highlighted this during our interview early this month. Second, we highlighted in the headlines reporting that we do on every show the interview with former CBY Governor Hafez Moayed, where he was calling in early January, he was calling for the UN Security Council to investigate this. And now on social media, we're seeing Yemenis putting his face, out there and saying, well, when are they going to freeze Moayed's assets? So it's interesting that other people are linking Hafez Moayed while the panel itself is looking at the current governor and other officials currently in the government. So if we look through these, we see through these paragraphs, we see the panel linking a lot of this corruption to the WFP programs themselves and traders that import food either for the government or for the UN. And if you recall, there was a big problem between the Houthis and the WFP last regarding stealing of food, etc. So the fact that the panel is highlighting this is really interesting today. It's really good work too, and we'll check out I recommend people check out the annexes when they do come out. On the second section, on paragraph 109, the panel looks at Al Said Group, which this is pretty big in itself. Al Said is the biggest merchant trading group in Yemen. And the panel is alleging that out of the near $2 billion the Saudis deposited for LCs, for lines of credit, Al Said was the biggest beneficiary in receiving $872 million from this deposit. So they benefited in upwards of $194 million because they were giving preferential treatment with these lines of credit. So definitely this is really good stuff. They're really looking at the role of private companies. Again, as I mentioned before, in 2018, 2019, the panel looked at a couple of advisors to the president that were benefiting from the oil industry. But that's for finance. That's it for me, Ali. What are your comments?
Yeah. First of all, Fernando, can you show me the pages of the report? So let me tell the audience that who follow us. I want to highlight some points in Arabic. التقرير بالنسبة للجانب الاقتصادي يركز على الأموال الطائلة التي جناها الحوثيون من عائدات النفط، من الضرائب، من الأسواق السوداء أيضا للمشتقات النفطية، والتي بلغت في عام.
This is the one about Cameron.
Yeah. بلغت 8 مليون ونص، 8 مليار ونصف ريال. وأيضا يس اوكي. التقرير تحقق فقط من جانب واحد بالنسبه للضرائب الحوثيين يعني تحصلوا على أموال طائلة من شركة كمران اللي هي الخاصة بصناعة السجائر، ومعظم هذه الأموال ذهبت إما لصالح مسؤولين في ميليشيات في جماعة الحوثي، أو ذهبت لصالح المجهود الحربي للجماعة. وبالنسبة للحكومة، التقرير قال بأن البنك اليمني المركزي أو التقرير حقق في قضية غسيل الأموال التي شارك فيها مسؤولين في الحكومة، يعني وما أثر على استيراد المواد الغذائية للمدنيين. يعني التقرير قال أظهر بأن 91 شركة تجارية استفادت من الوديعة السعودية، يعني 8 شركات حصلت على 48% من نسبة 1 مليار دولار من الوديعة السعودية. كل هذه 9 الشركات كلها تنتمي إلى مجموعة هائل سعيد أنعم. يعني وبالجزئية الثانية شركة أو مجموعة هائل سعيد أنعم تحصلت على ما مقداره 872 مليون دولار من الوديعة السعودية، يعني من خلال through enormous business ventures in different sectors، من خلال بعض الأعمال في القطاعات المختلفة. That's it, Fernando.
So in the annexes, the panel provides documents from the Houthi budget, provides memos between Houthi leaders or between institutions, and focusing on Kamaran, how Kamaran requested this money. Now, keep in mind, again, I bring back Kamaran because of that cigarette tax that goes to the Ministry of Youth and Sport. And I hate being a conspiracy theorist here, but I've discussed this plenty with people in Sana'a and with people outside. But the Minister of Youth and Sport was assassinated in Sana'a late last year. And for a while, there had been rumors of people closer to the Minister of Interior wanting to change Hassan Said, who was the minister at the time, wanting to change Hassan Said because they wanted a share of the money being collected and being used by the Ministry of Youth and Sport. So when we look at what Kamaran, the transfers that Kamaran, the amounts of money handled by Kamaran, you can see the fighting and why it was important in the infighting between the leaders in Sana'a, fighting for control of Kamaran and fighting for control of the Ministry of Youth and Sport. A lot of people just think of the Ministry of Youth and Sport handling, all of these sporting events and the Olympic athletes and everything, but it's a big business because there is a lot of tax revenue that goes to the ministry, that goes to the Ministry of Youth and Sport. Okay, so next.
So Fernando, I think this reveals a thread to why the Minister of Youth, the Houthi Minister of Youth and Sports, was assassinated.
It could. I mean, like I said, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but this has been something that was given to me that I've had conversations with when I asked, who would want Hassan Said? I knew Hassan Said for a while And he's a very, quiet type of man. He's very different than what we would see on media, with him being so explosive. And he was accused of human rights violations and a threat because he tweeted about children joining the militia and child soldiers and mothers, enlist your soldiers to the fight and everything. So he was criticized for that, and that sounded very, aggravating from his part. But in person, on the side, he was very different. So him being killed, I couldn't figure out why he would get killed. But a lot of people brought up that the assassination, there had been months and months of conflict among Houthi leaders, and they said, keep an eye on who's going to be the next minister of youth and sport, and who that new minister is linked to. Actually, the deputy minister of youth and sport in Sana'a is from Abiyan. It's another Zaidi leader from Abiyan. So that's very interesting. So the panel does go into the oil industry and discusses Decree number 75, which was criticized since 2007, since it came out in 2018, and it shows how it gave it gave preferential treatment to companies such as Tomco, which is co-owned by people close to Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Directly, to related relatives of Mohammed Salah Flita, who is the spokesperson for Abdul Malik al-Houthi. So
the spokesperson.
Right. So there was nothing very much on the asset freeze monitoring, except for 2 bank transfers. This highlights on paragraph 119 that on May 2020, a Swiss tribunal in favor of gave a decision in favor of the Swiss bank UBS, ordering the restitution to the bank of 3 folders containing sensitive information on 2 bank transfers totaling $65 million wire transfer from UBS bank account belonging to an unspecified listed individual to bank accounts in Singapore belonging to a family member of Ali Abdullah Saleh or Ahmed Ali Abdullah Saleh. So this is interesting. There is a money laundering case in Switzerland, but that's as far as it goes. It doesn't seem to have an annex on this showing anything further. The next section on paragraph 120 starts the IHL section. And in the IHL section, again, I want to start with a little critique on my end, because I'm a bit disappointed in the IHL section this year, knowing what happened in 2020, whether it was in the South, in Beida, Marib, Taiz, Ib, one interesting thing, we don't see the conflict in Ib between the security services and the mushrifin, the supervisors. A couple of security officials were killed, in this fighting.
Yes.
There is also, I might have missed it, but you correct me if I'm wrong, there is nothing about Amran with the killing of the sheikhs in Amran by the supervisors. And the kidnapping of the sons of the sheikh, just in early December, I think it was. Then the infighting in Hajjah that continues, there are 2 IHL experts on the panel. And this is the annual report. Yeah. And there's only 7.5 pages. There's tons of annexes explaining the issues, but there's only 7.5 pages, when before we had 10, 12 pages. And again, these things, in my opinion, needed to be addressed, especially because they're talking about the infighting between the Houthi leadership, within the Houthi leadership, not mentioning Ib and the killing and the problems in Ib, is a big miss. Not mentioning Amran, what's going on in Amran is a big miss. I think you brought up the whole thing about Haima, which we went through on episode 2 with Ms. Farouk. I think, it's understandable that they didn't mention that because, it didn't escalate until this year. It was, too late for them to report because they were writing in December. But to miss what's going on in Ib, to miss what's going on in Amran is a big miss, in my opinion. Paragraph 122.
Also, I'm sorry, Fernando. Also, they ignored the guerrilla warfare that happened in Taiz city. Clashes repeatedly took place there in the streets for many days between the armed factions there and the non-state factions.
Right.
Many civilians were killed, and no case of these cases were reported or mentioned.
Right. I mean, there were the reports about the arrest and the reports about the killing of the commanders and everything, but there was nothing about that conflict, which is a huge part of what's inflaming the conflict still in Taiz. Forget about the Houthis. There is fighting within the city of Taiz itself. And the Houthis are just sitting on the margins watching them fight. The next section is interesting because it talks about meetings between the panel and Jihad. Jihad is the Joint Incident Assessment Team based in Sana'a, Riyadh. This is a coalition or entity, and they're the ones that investigate the airstrikes by the coalition and all. And we talked about this during our interview with Khalid Yamani regarding the targeting of the Roy Shan funeral back in 2015 and other airstrikes. But the panel touches on the meetings with Jihad, and in specific, they talk about the bus in Diwan from 2019 and the wedding in Bani Qais in 2018. And so it's interesting that they bring up these issues. And again, we have to look at the annexes. But it is disappointing that in the text itself, there isn't much to say about this. Another disappointing segment of paragraph 126 is a 5-line paragraph on the continued disappearance of Mustafa Hussein al-Mutawakkil. He was arrested in Madrid. And I remember that we were reporting when I was in 2017 about this arrest. And so he's been in custody since 2018. It just says that the panel keeps sending letters. I mean, this is truly disappointing that the panel has not been able to deal with this case. The family has been asking repeatedly since 2018 for the whereabouts of Mr. Mutawakkil, who was detained going from Sana'a in Madrid. So that, Then later on, the paragraph 127 addresses the UAE directly and reference to Belhaf, the jail in Belhaf, the prison in Rayyan Airport, and the facilities in Zuba and Shahab that are still being used by the UAE in Belhaf by the Shebwani elites and Rayyan by the Hadrami elites. It didn't go any further than that. There is no annex to go with this. Is there an annex to go with this? No. So I wish there would have been a little bit more on that. And I'll go back to why it's important. Okay. And then it goes into the GOY violations. The extrajudicial killings. What I wanted to do is there is a very good work here because it looks at the use of schools in Taiz by militia, by government military forces. So that section is very good. It highlighted exactly every single school more or less, with some clear evidence. And I remember that the panel has been reporting since 2017, when I was the armed groups expert in 2017, and I created this view of ties, and with the map detailed exactly who controlled which segment of the city itself, from Abu al-Abbas to Islah, 35th Brigade, 22nd Brigade, Islahi militia, ISIS elements, and criminal organizations, which areas in the city they control, and therefore which mosque and which schools they control. So, the panel has been following this since 2017, at least when I was there. But it's very good. This is very good, and this serves to show that it's not just Houthis who are committing these IHL violations on the ground. A lot of these groups that are fighting the Houthis are committing the same violations, using civilian institutions for military purposes. So this also comes because they investigating the shelling of a hospital and the shelling of a school by the Houthis. But the Houthis came back. I remember these cases, and the Houthis came back and said, these are not schools. These are military headquarters. There are militia in this school, and they're preparing to attack us from here. So we're shelling this. So unfortunately, it does lend to Houthi excuses, for why they're shelling these civilian institutions. And the government in Taiz has addressed in saying, the Mahlafi group has left the schools. Well, they have left now, but they were there for months. In the Sela area, for example, in Taiz, Jumhuriya area in Taiz, for example, AQ, Ansar al-Sharia use police stations, use schools, use mosques for their fighters in 2016, 2017. So this is definitely something that people need to keep an eye on, and it's really, really good. Again, it touches on child soldiers, obstruction of aid, and the explosives used by Houthis, and a few lines about the Baha'i detainees. Your comments, Ali?
Yes, as I mentioned, Fernando, the report neglected lots of violations that happened during the last year. In Taiz, in Amran, as you mentioned, also in Al-Bayda. If you remember, Fernando, the clashes that happened in Bani Awad,
yep,
and in Mahliya, on the borders between Al-Bayda and Marib.
Right. There was no mention. There is no mention of the incident that sparked the war between Houthis and Sheikh Yasser al-Awadi.
Yeah, they neglected this. However, it highlights a big part, within the conflict, because, as you know, Yasser al-Awadi is considered like one of those high profile sheikhs in the area, and one.
Just think about this. Just think about this, Ali. From the time of the killing of this woman in Ratma, okay, until now, the Houthis have gained tremendous amount of territory in Bayda and Marib. So yeah, but just keeping that incident in mind. How the killing of this woman, right? That was then a banner for Yasser al-Awadi to call for the coalition, to call for support, to raise the tribes, the Awadi tribes, against the Houthis, leading to him having to leave his village and running. Now I think he's still in Marib. But if we look at that incident, and then look at everything else, Houthis have taken Radna. Houthis have taken Haifa. Houthis have taken over a southern Marib all the way to Murad mountain. That's a huge, that's huge.
Huge territory.
Right. And to neglect that particular incident, the failure of the government to deal with the Houthis at that time, the failure of the coalition to deal with the Houthis. We saw how late the coalition airdropped weapons for Awadi when he had already left Beida, and then the Houthis captured all those weapons, and they used them then to advance against Al Qaeda and ISIS in Haifa, and then move north in Yakla and move into Marib, into southern Marib. That is a huge event. Yeah. And I mean, on there's a page on table 3. It highlights it lists the attacks by Houthi forces, since 2019. So it lists every single place, the prison, the Thai central prison, the women's prison that the Houthis attacked, and then it highlights something that we discussed with Labib, right? The detentions that we highlighted in our conversation with Labib a few weeks ago. So you want to summarize this section, Ali?
Yeah, in Arabic. Can you show it, Fernando, to me? I mean, the biggest.
Go ahead.
في الانتهاكات قانون حقوق الإنسان الدولي، يعني الوقاع انتهاكات القانون الدولي، وأيضا الضربات الطيران بالطيران التحالف. Down a little bit. No. From the beginning, Fernando, could you put down? Yes, okay. That's it. Okay. Stop. التقرير سلط الضوء على الانتهاكات التي القانون الدولي لحقوق الإنسان في اليمن، وأيضا الأحداث التي ارتبطت مع ضربات طيران التحالف. The panel investigated 5 air strikes. البعثة أو الخبراء حققوا في 5 ضربات وتوصلوا إلى نتائج ضربات طيران التحالف، وتوصلوا إلى نتائج ضربتين في فبراير and جولاي عام 2020. Also في أكتوبر الفريق التقى بفريق تقييم ضربات طيران التحالف في الرياض، وتحصلوا على معلومات حول 8 ضربات خاطئة نفذها طيران التحالف أيضا. وفي نوفمبر السعودية زودت اللجنة بمعلومات عن 8 ضربات. البعثة الأممية تحققت فيها هذه الضربات، كانت بين العام 2016 و 2019. أيضا الفريق الأممي تحصل على معلومات أنه هناك تعويض دفع للضحايا لضحايا 6 من هذه الضربات بواسطة التحالف. هؤلاء الناس أو الذين تم تعويضهم قدموا إلى مأرب وحصلوا على تعويضات على النقد. وفي هذا الجزئية التقرير سلط الضوء على بعض الانتهاكات التي يزعم بأنها حدثت في معتقلات تتبع السعودية والإمارات. البعثة الأممية أو هذا تحقق في 5 حالات اعتقال. هؤلاء المعتقلين نقلوا إلى السعودية، ومنهم 3 لا زالوا محجوزين هناك. أيضا التقرير يقول يواصل التحقيق في اعتقالات عشوائية و إخفاء قسري وتعذيب بما يزعم القوات تتبع الإمارات في اليمن. هنا أيضا التقرير تحقق في 21 حالة لاعتقالات عشوائية وتوقيف. Can you get down? Can you get down? Down. No, I mean about the arrest and detentions in Shabwa. Yes, here.
Yeah, this is one of the sections that you wanted to highlight, because it is attributing arrest and detentions to the Southern Transitional Council, and highlighting the role of security belt forces, for example, against females in Dar Saad, etc. But there are a couple of annexes here. But I'll tell you that there isn't much detail, because if we look at the STC here in particular, the panel is not linking the STC to the security belt forces, right? So we have to look at the political and security section first to see how the panel links the SDC to the security belt forces. What authority does the SDC have on the security belt? Why is that the SDC has command and control of the security belt forces? Why the security belt is acting on behalf of the SDC, for example? I mean, SDC wears the PDRY flag. We discussed this in our first 2 interviews, in our first 2 episodes. The SDC continues to wear the PDRY flag, which is used by the SDC. The security belt forces do not use the ROY, the Republic of Yemen flag. We discussed this, with Khalid al-Yamani too, because when the special envoy visited Aden and the Governor Lamlas was giving the special envoy a tour, all the bodyguards at the airport that day were security belt forces and had PDRY flag. So where is this link? Where are we making this link? So we'll go over we'll go over the political and security section to see where the panel links the security belt and the transitional government, the transitional council. Okay, and attacks by Houthi forces, again, this is the list. So for me now, I want to share something to highlight this issue of it leading, because now we're going to move into the political and security section, the links between the SDC and the security belt forces. So, our friends in the South are not going to like this, but it is what it is, as we now say here in the U.S., and if we look here, we see the news. This is from January 26, 2021. And this is about the Ministry of Agriculture visiting the new security belt leader in Abiyan. We can do the little translation so those who are not Arabic speakers can look. And the question that's asked is, what's the relationship between agriculture and security belt forces? But it's interesting because someone in the panel has brought up this issue in Abiyan. And one of the things that has been brought up was, when you look at the fighting between the GOY forces and the security belt forces in Abiyan, if you look at the geography of the fight since last year, since 2019, the border of Shokra to the west, the area around Shokra, which is the border, this is where the détente is, this is where, when the Riyadh agreement started, this is where both forces clashed and they stopped, So this area is one of Abiyan's most fertile areas. This is where the farms are in Abiyan. Well, it's not only important for food production, but it's also important for tax revenue. So when we look at, and we'll look at the political section of this, the panel addresses the self-administration declaration by the SDC in the summer last year, and we have to look at this news linked to way back then, the summer of 2020, the September, October 2019, when the fighting was there, and why this important, this territory, this area is so important, and why this is happening today. And I'm kind of disappointed that this kind of detail was not included in the explanation in the panel report. Okay. Any comments, Ali?
No. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So now we go to the first section, which is the political and security section of the panel of the report. And it's very interesting, again, for a number of reasons, and we'll go through these. So when we're talking about ties, let's share this part here. Share the screen. This is of interest because, again, it talks about what we were just talking about, the IHL violation. So this section, paragraph 54, looks at the conflict in ties. Yeah, it looks at the role played by the 22nd, the 170th Brigade, the 35th Brigade, the Axis, military Axis, and Abdurrahman al-Shamsani. Yeah, and it looks at Ghazwan Ali Mansour Mahlafi, whom I've written a little bit about over the last couple of years when I describe the fighting in Taiz, and his name is always coming up, and his relationship to the commander of the 22nd Brigade. And when we look at this with Sadiq Sarhan, in 2017, when I was the armed groups expert, I wrote about Taiz, the fighting, and then eventually wrote about the killing of the ICRC worker outside the city of Taiz. And we described the role that soldiers and checkpoints manned by the 22nd Brigade played in that assassination. So it's good that the panel addressed this, and here they provide an image of Ghazwan and Mahlafi and Sarhan.
Yeah, this one.
So
this is Ghazwan.
Yeah, Ghazwan is the young guy over here, and this is the commander, Sadiq Sarhan. Yeah. And then on 57, this is interesting because we've seen in 2019, 2020, we saw the resurgence of influence from Mahmoud and Makhlafi in ties, and I've written a little bit about the friction in ties between Islahis linked to the Islah leadership in Riyadh and Islahi wing, allied with Makhlafi, who lives in Turkey, and Qatar. Yeah. So this particular section again fails to highlight that part of the conflict. It focuses on Makhlafi. It focuses rightly on the creation of these militia, but it doesn't mention this tension that exists inside ties and why. And this is, the role of Turkey, Qatar funding certain Islah members, while the Saudi Arabia and the GOI have a wing of Islah controlling ties and the tensions that exist. And it's interesting that the panel highlights the role of Makhlafi's foundations, and who funds these foundations and who operates these foundations on the ground. It is also missing in this in the report. And for me, it's important because this is part of what contributed to the crisis between Saudi Arabia and Qatar years back, 3 years ago, and the UAE and Qatar with the GCC crisis. So I think that this was missed in the report, and it was important to highlight, I think. Next is, let me go back. Anything that you want to highlight, Ali?
No, it was clear. It was clear, Fernando.
Right. So now, while I look around, our audience, I guess, can take a little break from listening to us ranting along here. But I want to start talking. Where are we? Yes. This is the first time that the panel looks at individual regional actors in the report. It was always highlighted as the coalition, so Saudi and the Emirates and their role. But in this particular section of the challenges to regional peace and security and stability, the panel goes straight. It's a good thing. It goes straight into naming, four countries.
Countries and individuals as well.
Right. So this is a really good portion of the report, looking straight into Iran. And again, I'm surprised that the media, didn't jump on this right away. Maybe they only received a portion of the finance and they didn't receive the whole report, but we got the whole report. And this is one of the main things that I want to highlight, because this is the conflict, and this is what's complicating. This is what's making it more complicated to deal with the peace process and de-escalation of the conflict. The first section on paragraph 20, it looks at the Islamic Republic of Iran and their role. And I just did an interview earlier today, where I talked about this. And unfortunately, the panel is giving too much weight to the statements by Iranian officials like this Brigadier General Shakarchi, who claims that Yemen is in their sphere, and in my interview, it probably comes out on Friday, I said that this line is always exaggerated. I know people want to jump on the line about the relationship between Iran and the Houthis, Iran and Sana'a, and now Iran has a new ambassador. But this is more of a relationship that legitimizes the Houthis internationally. And this is a PR win for Iran. It is a way for them to claim that they are at the back door of Saudi Arabia. We know that it gives Iran that ability to destabilize Saudi Arabia from abroad without actually doing it themselves. The Houthis are doing it for them. But this report is excellent in the way that it links Iran and the Houthis, in particular with the weapons. And we'll go through that in the next section. One of the things, again, that I want to highlight, and because we are a week or so from the date when the U.S. sanction listed Ansarallah as a foreign terrorist organization, we're going to see this. I'm going to highlight this everywhere we see it, and you'll see it here in the report. The Iranians use Ansarallah. Whenever they refer to authorities in Sana'a, it's always Ansarallah. They stay away from using Houthis, and we see this same thing with the UN envoy that uses Ansarallah, not the Houthis. So, a lot of people criticize Martin Griffiths, the UN envoy, because he refers to Abdul Malik al-Houthi as Sayyid. Every time he refers to Abdul Malik, he calls him Sayyid Abdul Malik, and people are like, you need to stop using that title. But it just further legitimizes in the eyes of Yemenis. It just further legitimizes Abdul Malik, right? So then these paragraphs go into the axis of resistance, right, which the Iranian leaders are pushing. But the panel continues to use, Houthi, the Houthis, Houthi authority, Houthi rebels, Houthi leaders, Houthi ideology. So it is very interesting the way that the panel maintains this line. When I was on the panel, we used this line, we used this. So it's interesting that they continue to use this approach amidst the current political climate. Yeah. Then the panel proceeds to highlight the role of Oman, and I'll say that this is kind of close to me because in 2018, when I pushed on this to put on the report, there was pushback against this, and always the question was, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? The evidence was there. People just didn't want to trust the sources, So now the panel, under new organization, under new leadership, there's a new coordinator. I don't know, the relationship with Muscat has changed, or they've been given a little bit more, leeway here. But it is interesting that they're highlighting Oman at this stage. And the focus on so far has been on the Mercy flights, which we know since 2016 have played a role in the transferring of officials from the Houthi side to Oman, from Oman into Sana'a. This is how the information I have from last year, this is how the new Iranian ambassador entered Sana'a. During that prisoner exchange, which the report highlights, and with a statement from Oman and from the envoy, this is how the new ambassador traveled from Oman into Sana'a within a UN flight, an Omani flight, during the prisoner exchange under the auspices of the ICRC and the UN envoy. So this is a very interesting, and I'm glad that they dealt with in paragraph 25. They deal with the smuggling, and we'll go through it in the arms section and later. But it's clear how they describe it in the previous panel in 2018. We described the northern route from Oman, North Mahra, Hadramaut to Al Jaw. Yeah. So now the panel is describing the sea route that has been utilized for a while, and then it goes straight into Saudi Arabia, and it addresses the role of Saudi Arabia with the remittances, with Yemenis living abroad, and how the loss of territory has affected the coalition. Yeah, and how the Saudis push the U.S. to list Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization. Then it goes into the UAE, and it does highlight UAE opposition to both Houthis and Islah. But interestingly enough, this section highlights how the UAE has listed the Houthis already as a terrorist organization, but it doesn't highlight how the UAE listed the Al-Islah by name as a terrorist organization. It's not, while the Saudi Arabia listed the Muslim Brotherhood, the UAE listed Al-Islah itself. So that's interesting that it's missing. And then it highlights the relationship between the UAE and Security Belt Forces and Shabwani forces. It does address the U.S. with the Houthis. Any comments, Ali?
No, thanks, Fernando. Go, and then I will, at the end, I will highlight the summary.
Well, this is something that I want you to definitely, because you're an audit, definitely I want you to comment on. And this is, Section B, paragraph 39, where the panel addresses the consolidation of power by the Southern Transitional Council. This is a pretty big thing because 3 years after the council, the Transitional Council was created, finally, I think the panel has taken the analysis up a notch. 2017, 2018, we incorporated the role the STC was playing on the ground, the challenges to the GOI. But this panel now, on paragraph 39, the panel finds that the activities of the Southern Transitional Council in 2020 constitute a violation of paragraph 1 and 6 of Resolution 2216. So now the panel is arguing that, in fact, the STC is within their mandate. And this is interesting because if the STC actions are in violation of 2216, then it opens up the STC leadership to sanctions.
Yeah, as the panel is hinting that the Security Council must sanction the STC, right?
Should look at the leadership, right? And the from the beginning, from the introduction, the panel mentioned Aydrus, right? Yeah. And Hani bin Bray. And then in this paragraph, it highlights the unilateral declaration of self-administration in April of last year, right? Which was rescinded in July as the Riyadh talks began on the Riyadh agreement. So paragraph 41, makes a pretty big allegation and again, it's 2017, the panel, 2018, the panel linked STC to Security Belt Forces. But in 2018, the panel made it clear that the GOI had incorporated security forces under the Ministry of Interior. So back then, the Hadi's government claimed they had authority over the Security Belt Forces and not the STC. And when we saw in 2019 the conflict in Aden, right, in October and September, August, September, October in 2019, with Al-Maysari, the Ministry of Interior, and the STC after the killing of Abu al-Yamama in 2019, we saw how Al-Masri and the government itself claimed that they had no control over the security belt, and these were STC forces.
Yeah.
So, in 1 year, the GOY claimed they had control of the security belt forces. The next year, they said they don't have any control of it. And now the panel here on paragraph 41, it says, in Aden, security operations are conducted by the forces affiliated with the STC.
Yeah, contrary.
And it continues to say the Silent Transition Council, the STC also used force to appropriate around 80 billion rial, or approximately 120 million dollars from the government of Yemen using security belt forces. So the panel here, it names Aidarus, Hani bin Barak, and Shalal as having operational control over security belt forces in Aden against the government. Yeah?
Yeah.
Anything from your side?
Exactly.
You want to summarize this?
I mean, Fernando, it's some very plain somehow, because as I said before, that they didn't bring, specific incidents or specific, incidents that the STC or the forces affiliated with the STC, as they say,
right,
have committed. Or
right. Just want to summarize this in Arabic so we can move on to the next section.
Okay. Can you yes, the top. اوكي. في هذه الفقره تقرير يوضح قوه تعاظم قوه المجلس الانتقالي. يقول ان الخبراء وجدوا ان الانشطه التي يقوم بها المجلس الانتقالي في عام 2020 يعني اعتبرت انتهاك بالنسبه للفقره الاولى والفقره السادسه من قرار 2216 قرار مجلس الامن، الذي يطلب من كل جهات الصراع اليمني تراجع عن الاجراءات حاديه الجانب التي تعيق عمليه الانتقال السياسي. وقال المجلس الانتقالي في 25 ابريل قام باعلان الاداره الذاتيه بشكل احادي الجانب، وهذا يعتبر يعني جزء من العرقله التي وضعها المجلس امام الحكومه الشرعيه. وفي الفقره 40 انه هناك hostilities between يعني هناك مواجهات التي حدثت بين الحكومه والمجلس الانتقالي في ابيان وفي سقطرى تصاعدت بشكل كبير. المجلس الانتقالي يقول انه قام بالسيطره على مؤسسات الدوله في سقطرى في يونيو، في 20 يونيو، ومن ذلك الحين لم تستطع لا الحكومه ولا السعوديه استعاده السيطره على تلك المؤسسات. اوكي. وهنا ذكر انه في الفقره 41 ستوب يعني القوات التابعه للمجلس الانتقالي قامت بنهب 80 مليار ريال، ما يقارب 125 مليون من الحكومه في فتره الاداره الذاتيه. وهنا حقيقه يعني يدخل الخبراء يعني يقولوا انه قياده المجلس الانتقالي عدل الزبيدي، هادي بن بريك، وشلال علي شايع منعوا ايضا من العوده الى عدن وسط التحالف، لكنهم لا زالوا مؤثرين على الارض. لا زالوا الإجراءات التي يقومون بها بشكل يعني أحادي تعيق السلام.
So yeah, I mean that to me is very important, and it's taking again. We talked when we spoke with Labib, and when I had the long chat with Halida Yemeni, we talked about the problems of the mandate, the scope of the mandate of the panel, and what they could write about, what they could investigate, what they couldn't. So it's good that they've taken this step further. But again, I wish that they would have elaborated a little bit more.
But
go ahead.
Nando, don't you see that there is the panel couldn't link between the Riyadh agreement?
Right. I mean, we don't see that, right? We don't see that as we should bring it, to summarize what happened since November 2019.
Yeah, I mean, they are talking as Riyadh agreement wasn't signed and wasn't there. I think in this, while they are describing the consolidation of the STC forces or the STC grip on the ground, they have to link it with the Riyadh agreement, because the UN support the Riyadh agreement.
Right. It is missing, and we'll go through the rest of this to see, where else they address it. But again, the panel addresses the killing of Hassan Said, which I mentioned during the talk about the finance. But again, it doesn't go into any analysis on this. It's just an incident that happened. It does have the interesting paragraph addressing the internal conflict, within the Houthi leadership. But again, I think that here it would have been good to link it back to previous panel reports, looking at the role of Abdul Malik al-Houthi. What makes him the leader? Why is his leadership threatened? And it's interesting because this is a fairly controversial issue, because the UN panel of eminent experts that's based in Beirut, in their first report, they called Abdul Malik al-Houthi the leader of the revolution. This was very problematic because it legitimized the Houthis in a very different way, for an international body to do that. The panel in this segment doesn't provide that introduction that it usually provided, in past years, about Abdul Malik al-Houthi and the structure of the Houthi family and the leadership at the moment. It just dives into the description of this internal conflict, which does exist. I'm not taking away from those facts. You have, again, this another thing that this report is not doing is, in order to provide more detail, in order to provide more nuance, you need to do the simplest thing, which is Abdul Malik Badr al-Din al-Houthi and Abdul Karim Amir al-Din al-Houthi. You need to establish that relationship between Abdul Malik and Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim is his uncle. Yeah? And it's interesting that they do it with Muhammad Ali al-Houthi, but they don't do it with Abdul Karim or Abdul Malik al-Houthi. So we are, to people that are keeping track of this, to Yemenis, you understand that, he's not the brother of Abdul Malik. He's a relative of Abdul Malik, and he's a relative of Abdul Karim. Yeah. But the two wings, right. But the two wings of the Houthi family, Badr al-Din al-Houthi, Amir al-Din al-Houthi. It is important for people to understand why it is important to highlight these two names, the two fathers, the father of Hussein al-Houthi and the father of Abdul Karim, the uncle. Because from the beginning, when Abdul Malik became officially the leader of the Houthi movement after Hussein was killed, there was tension between Badr al-Din al-Houthi and Abdul Karim al-Houthi, for example, because, Abdul Malik was young, inexperienced, etc. And in the Hashemi lineage competition issue, Abdul Karim was in a better position to take over leadership of the movement instead of Abdul Malik. And up until last year, when Abdul Karim became Minister of Interior, Abdul Karim had remained in the back. Behind closed doors, he was the one managing the economic, the executive committee, managing the supervisors, everything. But then the conflict between security forces and supervisors escalated to a point where Abdul Karim had to step in publicly, take over the Ministry of Interior, and basically make his presence known in order to keep control of the conflict that was going on in 2018. So there is no, in my opinion, there should be more background on this particular issue. And again, an individual that definitely, the panel published a report in July of 2020, which is confidential. We can't find out what's in there, but I assume this particular section on Ahmed Hamid was in that confidential report. And the reason why I'm surprised that Ahmed Hamid, was not one of the ones sanctioned by the U.S. The U.S. sanctioned 5 individuals in December. 5 individuals in December.
That's right.
And after we read everything that Ahmed Hamid is managing with Skamcha, basically we've mentioned Skamcha before on Twitter and during our interviews with Yamani, Labib, and others. This is an excellent profile of Ahmed Hamid. And again, we have to assume, Sultan Sabid was sanctioned by the U.S. in December 2020. So it is, it's an excellent profile. The annexes on it are excellent, showing the relationship to Skamcha and the relationship to other Houthi leaders. But again, I'm surprised that Ahmed Hamid was not in the list of individuals sanctioned by the U.S. Again, not too much on Tariq Salah and the guards of the Republic in Amalika, but they are mentioned. They are mentioned. Then there's the conflict in Taiz. Let me check to see. Any comments? Anything, Ali? While I'm looking for this other section.
No. I think the weapon smuggling is a very important section.
Yeah, that's next. So we're gonna go right into this. So this is an excellent section. This map highlights all the incidents, maritime security incidents around Yemen, and so you see here the targeting of Saudi and other international vessels with mines or drone boats, and as well as the seas boats, and we'll show this coming up. So it has on the attacks, very good stuff on the attacks by drone boats on international ships in the Red Sea. But what I want to get into is something, this is a look at the vessel that was hit. And this particular analysis is very interesting because the panel and authorities are alleging that this was caused by divers. Divers placed an ID, a mine, an explosive on the ship because this happened below the waterline. So this is very interesting. And the panel is actually linking this to conflicts in Shebwa over oil, over smuggling routes, rather than blaming it on Houthis or AQ, because back when this incident took place, some analysts claimed that AQAP would probably claim this incident, but they haven't. So any comments, Ali?
No, it was clear because it was illustrated with the map, and it was lots of details.
Right. This map here too, puts the spot on all the attacks claimed by Houthis in Saudi territory. The blue are missiles, and the pinkish figure are the drones. So again, the ones in Riyadh and Yanbu are disputed as not really having been by Houthis, but it doesn't get into that analysis here. It does get into the type of missiles that could have been used. And so linking it back to 2017, the strike in November 2017 in Riyadh with the two missiles, the panel points to the Burhan 2H and the Quds 1 as being the potential missiles used to hit. And so the panel links it back to the Houthis. This is pretty big too, and I haven't read the Reuters article on the CBY, the corruption in the CBY and everything, but this is pretty big expose on figure 7 after paragraph 71, where the panel alleges to have received information concerning a transfer of weapons from government military officers or camps to the Houthis in Al-Jawf. So this is something that has been highlighted elsewhere regarding, the smuggling of weapons from Ma'rib to the Houthis. Selling of weapons from Ma'rib to the Houthis. And this is why a lot of times when we see analysis of weapons by Houthis, a lot of people point to these having been issued to the coalition or being American weapons or being European weapons. So this particular memo here claims that those weapons ended up in Houthi hands. So this is a list of interdictions where various naval forces have captured boats around Yemeni coast. So now what I highlighted here is the interesting part, okay? And this is part of the debate that goes on among analysts regarding these boats and the smuggling of weapons. A lot of these boats are captured with light weapons, AK-47s, ammunition, etc. Things that actually, are in abundance in Yemen. Yemenis the Houthis don't need to smuggle Chinese AK-47s. They have plenty of AK-47s, they have plenty of munitions. They produce their own munitions for AK-47s because the army had that capacity under Ali Abdullah Saleh. So the interesting thing is, on this boat, they had chemical fertilizer. And if you recall, authorities in Aden seized truckloads of fertilizer a couple of years ago. So it would be interesting to see if this is the same type of fertilizer that was seized back then in Aden, in Lahaj. Then this other ship is interesting, and this is what we can say could be this smuggling of Iranian weapons to the more evidence to strengthen the argument that Iran is introducing weapons for Houthis, or the Houthis are bringing in weapons from Iran, because this boat was captured with missile launch containers. And I'll show you in a little bit how they are Iranian, the markings.
Yes, Fernando, that was, recently investigated. If you remember, a couple of months, I still remember when a committee went to Aden port to investigate what kind of fertilizer, and
right.
I think it's still the shipment is still there, available there.
Right, and then in this same boat, there were anti-tank missiles containers. There were components for two types of missiles, cruise missiles, and there were devices for IEDs, for example. Again, another one, containers, optical sights, and we'll go through this. And then on this one is RPGs and anti-tank containers. Now, there is a very interesting thing coming up, and this just talks about the route through Oman, through the waters of Oman. This figure map 4 shows, the route from Bandar al-Abbas in Iran to Oman into the Yemeni coast, Mahra and Hadramaut. So it's interesting. But this particular paragraph, and paragraph 74, is interesting because it addresses a lot of what some people like me have argued, that often the coalition in the U.S. make a big deal about these small boats with small weapons without the nuance, without pointing out that a lot of these shipments are going to Somalia. There may be Yemeni smugglers. Yemeni smugglers have been making money off the conflict in the Horn of Africa for a decade. Decades. And there are a lot of Yemeni smugglers who smuggle into the Horn of Africa, whether it's Djibouti or Somalia or Eritrea, So it's interesting that this paragraph highlights that some of these boats were destined for Somalia. They were just captured in Yemeni waters. And these go through some of the evidence. The smuggling of components that you see here, this is what I was referring to. The route used to go from Mahra to northern Hadramaut to Al Jawf. And this particular shipment, captured UAV components, etc. So it's good that they highlighted this. The cruise missiles, again, the panel highlights how the procurement process from Western Europe or China into Yemen. How many of these components were purchased by companies in Germany or Switzerland, ended up in Iran, and then ended up in Yemen. The same thing for China. I wrote an article about how Houthis were buying off-the-shelf drones in Malaysia or southern China, and then those were the ones that they were using for surveillance early in the conflict. Area on the surface-to-air missiles brings in China, Hong Kong, and the Netherlands. So these are investigations. I'm pretty sure we're going to keep reading about these investigations later on. The UAVs, this is a really good 2 paragraphs right here, really good 2 paragraphs, because they clearly point to Iran through companies, through companies registered in Iran, procuring weapons or components for Iranian weapons, but instead of being used for Iranian weapons, they ended up in Yemen. This is really good here. Paragraph 84 on the small weapons with the anti-tank missiles, the anti-tank systems, and how they've been altered in Iran from their original Russian models. So take a look at these. This is what I wanted to show you when you asked me about the video. Take a look at these, right? RPG launchers, and this, the AM-50 Sayyad. Now, the reason why I want you to take a look at this is because some of you that follow me on Twitter will notice how Joshua Kuntz and I go back and forth on Twitter. He does a great job at looking at Houthi and Al-Qaeda videos to geolocate their presence and their weapons more than anything. So look at this. Okay, so he geolocated the anti-tank canisters that are of the same type as those highlighted by the panel. And furthermore, he's geolocated it here, he's pinned it. But this right here, he has been doing a lot of really good work over the recent months. I mean, all throughout 2018, geolocating every single one of these Iranian sniper rifles, and a lot of people have been asking, well, there's no evidence that these are Iranian because it's an Austrian type. But these are made by Iran specifically. His contacts, his weapon experts have assured him that these are Iranian. And you see these in Adala. This was a sniper that was captured by forces in Adala with one of these Houthi sniper using this rifle. And the question has, for me to Joshua for a while has been, Joshua, where, here they are, and here's an image. Where's the image? Oh my God, I kind of lost it. But he has an image of the sniper rifle in one of those shipments, and for me, I've always asked him, Joshua, is this rifle, is it present in Yemen before the current war? Before 2015, do we see the Houthis using this rifle? And he still has not been able to locate images of this particular rifle used before this war. So, it would be, again, adding to the links between Iran and the Houthis if this particular rifle entered the war after 2015. It just lends to more and more evidence of their relationship. Any comments? Anything from you?
No. I think you are more familiar with the weapons.
And okay, I think that's, I think that's it, man. I think we went through the four sections.
Yeah. We went through the whole sections.
Right, and I mean, let me know what did we miss? What do you want to highlight? What should people keep an eye on?
Just I mean, the weapon smuggling routes. The panel focused on Oman as specifically. I mean, and say that some shipments were brought through the coastal roads of Oman and Somalia. So could you highlight a little bit, in this point exactly?
Yeah, this has been since 2017 when I was on the panel in 2018. There's definitely been, an effort to investigate this route from Oman, but Oman has always pushed back. The panel has requested to visit Oman on various occasions, and Oman, on the first time, Oman canceled the visit like at the last minute. Other times, were not very receptive to this. And the panel has requested to visit Masyuna, on the border area. Masyuna, which is right at the border in the middle of the crossing, and the area between Salalah and the border with Mahra. And that's an area that I had access to. I had contacts in Mahra. And other experts have had contacts in Mahra to allow for interviews and, go in and ask questions and find out, who is allowing the smugglers. Are these smugglers really good, and they're, going around Omani authorities that well, or somebody's facilitating? The panel in this report highlights that there is no evidence that the Omani government, anyone in the Omani government, is facilitating this. So the government, the panel goes out of their way to make sure that's it, that's highlighted. But it does make recommendations that Oman needs to improve their capacity to deal with smugglers along their coast, and also to call on international navies to patrol the Arabian Sea, the Hormuz, etc., better in order to capture more of these boat transfers. And the panel highlights, the transfer by sea, so from a big ship, from a mothership into a dhow into Yemen. So that's interesting. It's not saying that ships are landing in porting in Oman and then transferring to Yemen. So that's also interesting. They're not highlighting.
Also, Fernando, also the report neglected or ignored what's happening to the civilians and the soldiers of the elite forces in Shabwa. They didn't mention anything about them. Why?
Right. There was nothing about the protest in 2020 in Shabwa where civilians were killed. Right. There was nothing about the arrest of children in Shabwa. Right. The kidnapping of the children of pro-FTC officials, for example. These were things that were not highlighted. And again, I'm surprised because there are two IHL experts on the panel, and they have, tons of room to discuss this. If I may, let me look.
Also, the situation in Wadi Hadramaut was totally ignored.
Mahra, there was nothing about Mahra. I mean, the protests in Mahra continue. The Saudis, the coalition and the Saudis have increased their presence in Mahra, and the report itself is less than 49 pages. Less than 49 pages so far. Like, again, this needs to be edited. This should be a draft. But there are 49 pages for an annual report. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the two reports that I took part of were over 80 pages each, and then the annexes. So, yep.
Fernando, let me ask you. Did you find any mention regarding the significant role of Al-Qaeda?
No. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, there's minimal mention of AQ. There is the mention of them losing territory in Al-Baida, and there is mention of the allegations that the government is using AQ elements, but only in passing. There is no analysis of that. There is not in depth. Again, the panel has had different views on how to address AQ. There's also this tug of war between the Yemen panel and the panel on AQ, the monitoring panel on AQ and ISIS. There is no sharing of information, and the AQ monitoring team says, no, AQ is our mandate, not yours. You don't need to investigate it. But AQ and ISIS are part of this conflict, are destabilizing forces. however we describe it, whether you describe AQ as a bunch of mercenaries, whether you describe AQAP as really part of this transnational global jihadist group, ISIS, whether you describe it as a mercenary group or linked to Syria and Iraq, or even the Horn of Africa, it's not defined anymore. It's absent in the panel. And maybe it was in the July panel. Maybe they wrote something about it in the confidential panel, but not in this one so far. We have to wait until the final draft comes out.
It's okay, Fernando. That's all. I think we have covered the whole thing. The report included and highlighted the most crucial thing.
Right. Again, why look at this article? Why look at this report? Why spend time going through it? Why is it important? Well, the international community uses this report to try to understand what's going on in Yemen. Not all members of the Security Council. Not all members of the Security Council have the same intelligence capabilities of the P5. Russia, China, Germany, France, UK, the US. So a lot of governments use these reports to understand what's going on in the conflict. And if they don't get enough information, then they don't understand what's going on in Yemen. They can't help. They can't contribute to the peace process. There is no way to determine from a report or from information, how a peace process can begin. Where are the opportunities for the peace process under these scenarios that the panel report describes? Where does the UN special envoy begin? When with this situation in Yemen. So, for me, these reports, are important. The information in them in the report is important. Again, omissions are important. Why we're not there, everything. There was not much about the work of the UN organizations and what's impeding their work. There was a bit on the WFP and the corruption and everything, but so much. If you recall, last year there was a group of Yemeni activists that exposed the profits by Houthis from working with UN agencies in Hodeidah, for example. Remember the expose about the hotel, the millions of dollars spent on this hotel, the security, the cars, the contract given to a Houthi leader for demining. So the joke was, one group of Houthis mines a field, and then another group gets paid to remove the mines. This kind of stuff, is missing altogether. There is nothing about the corruption leading to the moving of the UN headquarters from the Sheraton to a Universal property. There is nothing, now that Abu Taha is not in the NSB, but these individuals sanctioned by the US, they're not included in this report, and their role included in this report. When the last report highlighted the role of Azanabiyat and the role of the director of security in Sana'a, and again, it's less than 50 pages. The report itself is less than 50 pages. The text of the report, the annexes take it up to 230 pages. But I think they had more. I don't recall seeing that their word limit was decreased. But we could have seen another 20 pages or so, 30 pages of text dealing with what you mentioned in Shebwa, dealing with Ib, dealing with Amran, dealing with the Mushrifin. With the panel hasn't dealt with the supervisor since 2019. Who is in the Sana'a government? Who are the Houthi leaders in Sana'a today? Has anything changed over the last year, 2 years, since the Ministry of Interior came out? So there's some things missing. Hopefully the final version of this has a lot more information. I think I can see here that there are 65,000 words. The report is about 65,000 words when it's usually about 80,000 words. So, these are the things I look at because I'm kind of familiar with this process, but I'm also now on the outside wanting more information, wanting to see more information out of here. And I know Yemenis expect a lot from a UN report. And you tell me, now that you've seen it, you tell me as a Yemeni, if you find it useful, if you think it's going to contribute to something.
Yes, it summarizes how the UN and how the UN experts just look at the conflict dynamics in Yemen.
Right.
And how they are handling with everything here regarding the conflict and the politics and the violations committed by the different factions.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that within the next few days, we're going to see new media articles out there coming out with more and more dealing with this information. I'm interested in to see how the media in Europe and the media in Saudi and Yemen deal with this report, see what they focus on, see what they talk, see what they bring up and their critiques. And I want to see the final version. I want to see what they come up with once the Security Council accepts it, once they edit it. I mean, this version has a lot of mistakes in it, in it. So I know it's not a final version. I know it's not a final draft. Interestingly enough, I have to highlight the front page. I didn't show it. I didn't want to show it for many reasons, but the front page is the signature page, and it has my signature there. Doesn't have my name. I haven't worked for the panel in 2 years. It doesn't have my name on it, but it has my signature. So that was interesting. I already emailed. It has my signature in it. I mean, they mixed up my signature for somebody else's signature. They put the right name of the expert, but they put my signature on it, and I have horrible handwriting. And I told my wife, I'm like, I recognize my signature even when I'm blindfolded. I can know my signature. It's so horrible, and so I emailed a screenshot of it to one of the members, and I'm like, hey man, if my signature is going to be on this, I need to get paid. I need to get paid. I don't care about taking credit or anything. I just need to get paid. But it's interesting. Hopefully they fix it. I mean, I know they have to fix it because this eventually is going to end up in the Security Council official records, and they have to remove my signature. So that was funny. It was the first thing I saw. I scrolled down and I'm like, that's my signature. So that's the funny part in there. But thank you, Ali.
Thank you so much. It was a very fruitful session.
Long session. We've been here almost 2 hours. With me rambling on.
Yeah, it was as long as the report. The report was really long.
Right. So last year I wrote a blog post about the report right before I came out. This year, we're lucky that now we're doing this podcast, and now we can do differently. People can listen in parts and sections. They don't have to listen to the whole 2 hours in a row, but they can pick, fast forward, rewind, when they get tired of my voice or something. But hopefully this is helpful. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully this is helpful to someone out there. And instead of, writing a blog post, I get to do this, and we're going to be tweeting about this. So keep an eye on our Twitter accounts, on our Facebook page. We'll be posting some written analysis on some of this stuff, and hopefully you find it helpful. We good?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you very much. I hope your wife feels better. I hope she recovers soon. And thank you. I know you're tired. I want you to go home and relax a little bit.
Yeah, I will relax for an hour and then I will go to the gym, I think.
Good. Thank you very much again. Talk to you soon.
See you soon.
Talk to you. Don't forget, we have the second episode already up on Anchor, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel. This is an interview with Ms. Farouk about Al-Haima ties and with Amar Basha talking about filmmaking in Yemen. And the big thing for us is we just finished this last weekend. We finished recording this awesome episode with the theme of the 10 years since the Arab Spring. We're really excited. We don't want to post it too soon, so we're editing some stuff on it for the video and the audio, and hopefully we'll post it at the end of next week, closer to the.
Yeah, even I have seen my followers on Facebook. They are very enthusiastic to listen what's going on in the episode, because it was really good, because we have hosted, high profile figures, and
we're going to have Dr. Kurbi, Dr. Abu Bakr al-Kurbi, who's a foreign minister under the Hadi government, and Ali Abdullah Saleh. We have Amir Ali Salam al-Baid, a member of the STC. His father was president of the PDRY. He was vice president during Unity, leader in Iraq, close to Zubaydi and Shalal. We have Nasser al-Rabi from Sana'a. He's a good friend, a journalist, working from Sana'a on Twitter, Facebook, very active. We have Ibrahim Katabi in New York, Yemeni American in New York. He was very active during the Arab Spring uprising in Sana'a, and very close to Tawakkul Karman before she received the Nobel Prize. And our good friend Labib Nasher again, talking to us about what he saw in Change Square in 2011, the ambitions, the aspirations of the youth and everyone at Change Square, and the aftermath. He gave a pretty good explanation of how the youth lost that struggle over the last 10 years. And so I'm really excited about that episode. It will come out right before the 10-year anniversary. And then we already recorded the following episode, which is an interview with Nasser al-Rabi in Sana'a about the situation in Sana'a, and Mr. Munir Saeed, who's a consultant that I met, a very active person. I met him way back during the Arab Spring. And he has great insight, and he brought up some very interesting issues recalling the 10 years since the Arab Spring. So we have two really good episodes, in my opinion, coming up in the weeks. Thank you, Ali. Now it's for real.
Thanks so much, Fernando. See you soon.
Now it's for real. We'll talk later. Go rest.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.